He accused her of using his deaf mother for money in front of New York's elite. One minute, she was the woman who gave his mother a voice. The next, she was a gold digger on trial under chandelier lights. But what Carter Whitmore didn't know was that the real thief was standing right beside him. What happened on that balcony changed everything and exposed a truth no one saw coming. Would you have stayed silent if someone you cared for humiliated you in public? Comment stay or walk away, and let's see what you would have done.
Laughed at her for greeting a billionaire's mother like an equal. But when Harper lifted her hands and spoke without a single word, the entire restaurant froze. That night, she didn't just change one woman's life. She exposed a secret that powerful people had spent years hiding. And none of them saw it coming. If this happened at your workplace, would you have stayed silent or done what Harper did? Comment, I'd speak up, if you think you would have had the courage. The night shimmered over Midtown Manhattan, the skyline glittering like glass and steel diamonds. Inside the Aurelia, perched on the 60th floor of Hudson Tower, every detail whispered luxury, from the hand-blown crystal glasses to the low hum of old money and quiet conversation. At table 7, 3 men discussed a deal that could move markets. Beside them sat Vivian Whitmore, silent, graceful, and strangely apart from the noise, her eyes distant, her hearing long gone. Across the room, Harper Reyes, 24, worked her double shift. Her hands moved faster than her thoughts, clearing plates, refilling glasses, but her mind wasn't on the tips. It was on the overdue rent waiting in her mailbox, and the therapy payments for her little brother Leo, who hadn't heard a sound since birth. Harper had grown used to being invisible in rooms like this, until the moment she noticed Vivian's stillness. A waiter leaned down toward Vivian, speaking loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Ma'am, would you like still or sparkling?" The words were slow and exaggerated, as if yelling could build a bridge that wasn't there. Vivian's face stiffened. She didn't respond, not because she didn't understand, but because she'd seen this 1,000 times before. People thought silence meant weakness. Across the floor, Harper froze mid-step. She knew that look. She'd seen it on Leo, that quiet pain when the world shouted at you instead of learning your language. Before she could stop herself, Harper walked straight to table 7. The air changed. Managers noticed. Waiters held their breath. She didn't speak. She signed. "Good evening, Mrs. Whitmore. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight." The motion of her hands was fluid, elegant, a language of grace. For the first time that evening, Vivian's eyes came alive. Her lips parted in surprise, then lifted in a trembling smile. The men at the table went silent. One of them, Carter Whitmore, Vivian's son and one of the wealthiest men in the city, set down his phone and looked up, confusion flickering in his eyes. He'd never seen anyone talk to his mother like that, not even him. Vivian responded, slowly at first, her fingers hesitant, like muscles waking up after years of sleep. "You know my language?" Harper smiled gently and signed back, "My brother does. I grew up in it." That was it. The moment the audience would later call the silence that spoke louder than words. Every person within sight of table 7 felt something shift. The elegant, untouchable widow of a billionaire wasn't a symbol of pity anymore. She was a woman rediscovering her voice. Carter's expression hardened, not with anger, but with discomfort. A stranger had done in 30 seconds what his millions never could. The restaurant's manager began walking toward Harper, panic tightening his jaw. Staff weren't allowed to engage with VIPs unless spoken to. Harper knew that. Everyone did. But when Vivian's laughter, soft, breathy, genuine, filled the air, even the manager stopped short. The sound, though faint, carried more power than any boardroom announcement. Harper bowed her head respectfully, ready to step away. Then, Vivian touched her wrist lightly, a silent thank you. Harper didn't know it yet, but that small human moment was about to pull her into the orbit of one of New York's most powerful families and into a storm she never asked for. After dinner, Harper returned to her station, pretending to polish glasses while her heart pounded. She saw Carter lean toward her mother, his lips moving in a way that only half matched the signs she'd seen earlier. He was trying, awkwardly, to communicate. Vivian responded with patience, but the sadness in her eyes gave her away. Their conversation was broken by walls neither of them could see. Minutes later, Carter stood and approached the hostess stand. People whispered. Billionaires didn't walk the floor. He asked Harper's manager for the girl who signed. The manager stiffened, eyes darting like he'd just been handed a live grenade. Harper stepped forward cautiously. Carter's tone was polite but sharp. "My mother would like to thank you personally." The manager cut in, voice trembling. "Mr. Whitmore, she's busy with—"
Carter didn't even glance at him. She'll be compensated. Moments later, Harper found herself back at table 7, only this time no one else was seated. The partners were gone. Only Carter and his mother remained. The city lights framed them like a painting. Vivian signed warmly, "Sit, please." The manager looked horrified. Harper hesitated, glancing toward her coworkers for help. Carter said just one word, quiet, commanding, impossible to ignore. "Stay." And the whole room seemed to stop breathing. Harper sat, her hands folded nervously in her lap. She wasn't supposed to be here. She could lose her job. Vivian began signing slowly, her eyes shining. She thanked Harper again, then told her something that made the young woman's throat tighten. "People forget I can think when they can't hear me answer." Harper didn't know what to say. She looked at Carter, the son of the woman she'd just connected with. His expression was unreadable. Carter finally spoke. "You speak this language like it's music." Harper shook her head softly. "It's not a language. It's a way to see people." The line hit deeper than either of them expected. For a moment, Carter's businesslike demeanor cracked, revealing a flicker of emotion. He quickly masked it again. He looked to his mother and then back to Harper. "You've done something no one else has in years." Across the restaurant, phones were subtly recording, staff whispering. The billionaire's son speaking to a waitress wasn't something anyone expected to see tonight. Vivian touched Harper's hand and smiled, not as a client, but as a human being finally seen. Harper excused herself gently. As she walked away, she felt every eye in the restaurant following her. She didn't know it, but one care, belonging to Knox Carrington, Carter's cousin and COO of Whitmore Group, watched her with interest that didn't feel kind. He smiled faintly and typed something into his phone. That night, Harper took the subway back to Queens, still in her uniform. The city blurred by, a wash of lights and noise. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something else. Hope, maybe. In her pocket sat a folded napkin with elegant handwriting, Vivian's handwriting. It read, "Thank you for speaking to me like I still mattered." She smiled, pressing it close to her chest. Meanwhile, across town, inside a penthouse overlooking the Hudson, Carter stood by the window, replaying the moment again and again. His mother's laughter, her eyes glowing like he hadn't seen in years. And behind him, in the shadows of the same room, Knox poured a drink, watching silently. Careful, cousin. One good deed can ruin everything. What Harper didn't know yet was that the kindness she showed that night had already set off a chain of events that would expose lies buried deep inside one of New York's most powerful families. Would you have done what she did, knowing it could cost your job? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe before the next twist, because the secret she's about to uncover will leave everyone speechless. Harper's hands trembled as she cleared the last table at the diner. Carter Whitmore's proposal echoed in her mind. He wanted her to be his deaf mother's interpreter for 10 days, leading up to the big spring gala at the American Museum of Natural History. A billionaire inviting a poor waitress into his world? It sounded like a fairy tale or a trap. Across the counter, Carter awaited her answer with an earnest gaze. "You'd live at our estate temporarily and accompany Vivian to all her events," he explained gently. "We'd compensate you well, of course." Harper's voice caught in her throat. "I have a job here, and my brother, Leo, he needs me." She thought of her little brother waiting at home in Queens, medical bills piling up on their kitchen table. Could she really drop everything? Carter leaned forward, sincerity in his tone. "We'll take care of all that. I promise, Harper. My mother felt a connection with you. She specifically asked for you." Vivian's brief smile earlier that day, when Harper greeted her in sign language, had already melted Harper's heart. Now that memory tugged hard. Harper glanced at the modest tip money in her apron and imagined Leo's fragile smile if she could finally afford his new treatment. This opportunity could be life-changing. With a shaky breath, she nodded. "All right, I'll do it." Her heart pounded at the enormity of what she'd just agreed to. The relief on Carter's face was immediate. "Thank you. You won't regret it." The very next morning, a town car pulled up outside Harper's crumbling Queens apartment. She hugged Leo goodbye, promising she'd be back soon with something good for him. By 10 a.m., she was in Manhattan, stepping nervously into an upscale Madison Avenue boutique alongside Carter and Vivian Whitmore. Within minutes, Harper was being fitted for elegant outfits she never dreamed of wearing. In the mirror, a seamstress adjusted a silk evening gown on Harper's frame, while Vivian watched with delight. Harper hardly recognized herself. Was that elegant girl in the mirror really her? When she finally stepped out in a deep emerald dress, Vivian's eyes lit up. The older woman signed, "Beautiful," with a broad smile. Even Carter seemed momentarily awestruck. He cleared his throat and murmured, "You look incredible." Harper's cheeks warmed at the gentle praise. The bond between them all was forming without a single word spoken aloud. They lunched that day at Balthazar in Soho. Amid the bustling clink of plates and the glow of vintage mirrors, Harper found herself translating lively conversation between Carter and his mother. Over crusty bread and French onion soup, she voiced Vivian's witty asides and signed Carter's responses. For a moment, Harper felt like she belonged at their red leather booth, almost part of the Whitmore family. Then Carter's advisor, Knox, arrived mid-meal. A tall man in a sharp suit, he greeted Harper with a polite, thin smile that never reached his cold gray eyes. "So, you're the new interpreter," he shook his hand. "Hope you can handle the pressure." It sounded courteous, but Harper sensed the subtle warning underneath. As Knox pulled Carter aside to murmur something about vetting and security, her stomach knotted. Clearly, not everyone in the Whitmore circle welcomed her. In the days that followed, Harper's world turned upside down. She accompanied Vivian to a charity art preview at Sotheby's, mingling with art collectors under crystal chandeliers. On another evening, she found herself at a Hudson Yards penthouse cocktail party overlooking the glittering New York skyline. Each new experience was enchanting, yet daunting. Harper was living a wish-fulfilled life far from diner counters and overdue bills, but she also felt the weight of it all. The expectations, the whispers of staff, and Knox's watchful glare reminding her she was only a visitor in this world of power. Through it all, Vivian remained by Harper's side as a comforting presence. They shared quiet jokes and sign language during dull charity speeches and bonded over small moments, Vivian squeezing Harper's hand whenever she felt overwhelmed. In Harper, she found a compassionate companion. In Vivian, she found a mentor and friend. Their connection grew stronger with each passing day, easing some of Harper's fears. Still, late at night in her plush guest room at the Whitmore mansion, Harper often stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Could a life like this ever be hers? And did she even want it? The class divide between her and the Whitmores felt vast. Carter was kind and attentive, but he moved through privilege as easily as breathing, while Harper found even the opulence of the bathroom intimidating. She reminded herself she was here for Vivian and for Leo back home more than for fancy dinners or designer dresses. On the eve of the gala, Harper finally returned to her Queens apartment to check on Leo and grab a few things. Climbing the familiar narrow stairs, she felt reality settle back on her shoulders. The paint in the hallway was peeling, and the scent of someone's cooking drifted through the thin walls. Home. It was a far cry from the Whitmore estate's marble floors, but it was hers. She was about to unlock her door when she nearly tripped over a package on the welcome mat. Bending down, Harper picked up a velvet box tied with silver ribbon. Her name was on the tag. Inside, nestled on satin, lay a breathtaking sapphire and diamond necklace. Her heart lurched. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen, and surely the most expensive object she'd ever held. There was a handwritten note from Carter. "For Vivian's Gala, thank you." Harper sank onto the top stair, turning the velvet box over in her hands. The necklace sparkled even in the dim light of the hallway. A symbol of trust. Or was it something else? Gratitude or gilded chains? Her mind raced. She thought of Vivian's kindness, Carter's generosity, Knox's wary eyes, and Leo's hopeful face. This lavish gift made her feel special and appreciated, but also slightly controlled. It was as if the Whitmores were weaving golden threads around her, tying her to them with each favor. Harper drew a shaky breath, unsure whether to smile or cry. Was this necklace a gesture of genuine thanks, or a gentle way to assert power over her? The answer felt as elusive as the glint of the jewels in her palm.
The first time Harper saw her own face on a phone screen, she almost dropped the cup of coffee she was holding. A stranger had filmed her signing with Vivian Whitmore during a quiet morning walk in Central Park, and now the clip had exploded across social media. Millions watched as the video's caption flashed, "Poor waitress communicates with billionaire's deaf mom. What happens next is beautiful." In less than 24 hours, her life had changed again. The comments poured in by the thousands. Some called her an angel. Others accused her of faking kindness for attention. And as the world took sides, Harper realized something that chilled her. Fame didn't always come from what you said. Sometimes it came from what people thought they saw. The next morning, the Aurelia restaurant was chaos. News vans parked outside, and reporters tried to interview anyone who had been there that night. The manager cornered Harper near the back hallway, whispering sharply, "You need to stay quiet. This kind of attention, it's bad for business." But that same bad attention was bringing reservations in waves. The phone rang nonstop with requests for the table where it happened. Harper didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Meanwhile, at Hudson Tower, Carter was on his third cup of espresso, scrolling through headlines. He couldn't stop thinking about how his mother looked in that video. Radiant, alive, unguarded. The city saw her humanity for the first time. Not as a silent relic of wealth, but a woman rediscovered. But for Carter, the video was a double-edged sword. The same story that made his mother look like a hero also made him look like a stranger in her world. That afternoon, Harper joined Vivian for a visit to the Bronx Center for Deaf Education, one of the Whitmore Foundation's partner schools. It was a modest brick building tucked between two busy streets, but inside, the energy was electric. Children signed to each other across classrooms with smiles so wide they could light the city. As Harper translated between Vivian and the teachers, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just helping a rich woman anymore. She was helping children like Leo, kids who deserved to be seen and heard. Vivian touched Harper's shoulder and signed softly, "This place reminds me of why I fought so hard before I lost my hearing." Harper signed back, "Then maybe this is how you find that fight again." For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet between them felt sacred. But someone else was watching. In the corner of the room, Knox Carrington stood, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes sharp as glass. He had tagged along to represent the foundation, but Harper could feel his scrutiny like a cold wind. When Vivian and Harper left the building, Knox lingered behind. He asked the school's director, Nadia Patel, a few too many questions about their funding, their audits, and why they had recently cut some programs. Nadia found it strange. Most donors only cared about ribbon cuttings, not line items. Later that evening, Harper and Vivian stopped by Balthazar for dinner again. Same corner booth, different energy. As they sat down, the waiter greeted Harper like an old friend. "The whole city's talking about you. That video gave me chills." Vivian smiled proudly, but Harper felt uneasy. Attention had a price. Halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts." Her chest tightened. She showed the text to Carter later that night when he joined them. He frowned, his expression hardening. Ignore it. The internet thrives on noise. But Harper could tell from the way his jaw clenched that he didn't believe his own words. The next few days blurred together in a rhythm of charity meetings, planning sessions, and press inquiries about the upcoming spring gala. Carter kept the press at arm's length, declining interviews about the viral video. Yet everywhere Harper went, whispers followed. "She's the girl from the clip. The waitress who melted the Whitmore's ice. Think she's dating him?" It didn't matter that nothing romantic had happened. The public had already written their version of the story. And Harper, though flattered by the kind comments, started to feel trapped inside a narrative she didn't control. On the 8th day of her contract, Harper met Carter in his downtown office, a minimalist glass space overlooking the Hudson. The city below looked like a different universe. He was pacing near the window when she arrived. "We're getting questions about the foundation's donations. Some schools say our pledged amounts never came through. That can't be right." Harper frowned. Could it be a mistake?
Carter sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "If it's not, it's serious. My mother's name is tied to every grant." He paused, then added, "Knox handles most of those disbursements." The air between them grew heavy. Harper didn't know Knox well, but she'd seen enough to know he liked control more than charity. She hesitated before speaking. "At the school, Nadia mentioned something about missing funds too." Carter turned sharply. "What exactly did she say?" "Just that the money they were promised didn't match what arrived," Harper answered. She didn't sound angry, just confused. Carter stared out the window, his reflection blending with the skyline. "Knox swears the books are clean." He said it like a man trying to convince himself. That night, Harper returned to her tiny apartment in Queens. Leo was asleep, his sketchbook open beside him. She smiled, brushing a hand through his hair before setting the notebook aside. Then she noticed something odd. Another envelope slid under her door. It was plain, without a return address. Inside, a single printed photo. A candid shot of her walking beside Carter and Vivian after the BCDE visit. Scrawled in red ink across the bottom were the words, "Know your place." Her stomach dropped. Someone was watching her. She rushed to the window, scanning the street below, but saw only passing cars and the neon glow of the deli across the block. Her heart pounded. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the threat itself, or the thought that it came from someone inside the Whitmore circle. The following day, at the Foundation's pre-gala press event, Harper did her best to hide her unease. Cameras flashed as she stood quietly behind Vivian, translating warm greetings for the journalists. Carter watched from a few feet away, his usual composure cracked by worry. Knox, however, looked completely unbothered. He smiled through the questions, shaking hands, projecting charm. But every time Harper glanced his way, she caught a flicker in his eyes, the kind that told her he enjoyed control far too much to ever let it go easily. The city was watching them all now, but so was someone else. Someone in the shadows, with their own agenda. Harper didn't realize it yet, but the attention she once thought was flattering was about to become dangerous. That evening, when she returned home, Leo handed her the tablet he'd been using. "Sis, you're trending again." "Look, The screen displayed a new headline. Waitress turned interpreter spotted with Whitmore hair. Is love blooming? Her pulse spiked. She didn't even have time to react before her phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. This time it said, "You're playing a game you don't understand." She sat on the edge of her bed, gripping her phone. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she could protect herself, Vivian, or Leo from what was coming. Because when the world starts watching, it doesn't just applaud. Sometimes it tears you apart. She thought the spotlight was a blessing. But what if it's the trap? Would you have stayed after receiving that message? Comment yes if you'd fight for the truth, or no if you'd walk away before it's too late. And don't forget, the next twist hits harder. Subscribe before Harper finds out who sent that photo. The night of the spring gala arrived like a fairy tale and ended like a nightmare.
Gone was the girl from Queens. Tonight, she wore an emerald silk gown that hugged her modest frame with quiet elegance. The diamond sapphire necklace from Carter Whitmore glistened at her throat, the same one that had made her uneasy when it first arrived at her door. Now, under the lights, it sparkled like it belonged there. But deep down, Harper knew she didn't. She stood beside Vivian Whitmore, signing every word the older woman wanted to express to guests who came to greet her. Vivian was radiant, her silver hair pinned neatly, her posture regal. For the first time in years, she wasn't the silent widow of wealth. She was the voice of her own story, and Harper was the bridge that made it possible. Across the hall, Carter watched them with quiet pride. For once, his mother looked genuinely alive. Not an accessory to his empire, but a woman reborn. But not everyone shared his joy. Knox Carrington, Carter's cousin and the Whitmore Foundation's chief operating officer, lingered by the bar. His glass never reached his lips. He was studying Harper, every gesture, every smile, every flicker of her hand toward Vivian. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with calculation. He wasn't here to celebrate. He was here to control the story. When the orchestra struck its first chord, the gala began. Speeches, laughter, donations, the usual rhythm of New York charity nights. Harper translated for Vivian flawlessly, her hands moving with grace and emotion. Guests applauded, cameras flashed. But then came the first moment that turned the night uneasy. As Harper and Vivian finished speaking with the senator, a woman in pearls whispered just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Isn't she the waitress from that viral video?" Heads turned. Some smiled politely, others smirked. Harper felt the weight of their stares. She wasn't ashamed of her past, but she could sense the room's quiet divide. Half admired her rise, half despised her for crossing class lines they believed were sacred. Carter noticed. He stepped closer, whispering, "Ignore them." But she couldn't, not when whispers spread like wildfire in places built on reputation. After dinner, Carter invited Harper to the dance floor. The orchestra played a slow jazz tune. For a few minutes, everything else faded. They moved together under the chandeliers, the world around them dissolving into soft color and rhythm. Vivian smiled from her table, a hint of joy in her eyes as she watched her son laugh, something he hadn't done in years. For that fleeting moment, Harper forgot the differences between them. The way he looked at her, kind, grounded, and grateful, made her believe that maybe bridges could be built even between worlds as far apart as theirs. But then, reality returned. Just beyond the edge of the dance floor, Knox appeared, holding a thick folder in one hand and an expression that could slice glass. He waited until the song ended, then stepped forward. "Carter," he said, voice cool but sharp. "This isn't the time." "It is," Knox insisted, lowering his voice, "before the cameras roll again." Vivian's smile faltered as she watched them.
Carter followed Knox toward a side hallway lined with marble columns, where the music dimmed and the buzz of the crowd became distant noise. Harper couldn't hear the words, but she saw the way Carter's shoulders stiffened, the moment Knox handed him the folder, the way his eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. Whatever it wasn't good. 15 minutes later, Carter returned, but he wasn't the same man. Gone was the warmth. The softness in his eyes had hardened into something cold, distant, unreadable. He found Harper by the champagne table, and for a moment, he just looked at her. The pause stretched long enough for her to feel it in her chest. "Is everything okay?" she asked quietly. His answer was flat. "Depends on who you ask." He gestured for her to follow him toward the balcony. The spring air outside was brisk, sharp against her skin. Harper's heart raced as Carter turned to face her.
"I need to ask you something," he said. "And I want the truth." She frowned. "Of course." He held up the folder. Inside were printed screenshots, loan records, and old bank statements. Knox ran a background check. "You've got outstanding debts, personal loans, medical bills." His voice stayed calm, but his words cut deep. "Why didn't you tell me?" Harper's breath caught. "Because none of that defines who I am." He didn't blink. "Maybe not. But people are saying you've been playing me, using my mother to get close, to get something more." She stared at him, disbelief flooding her eyes. "You think I'm after your money?" Carter didn't answer. The silence was louder than any accusation. "Carter," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I helped your mother because I cared, because she reminded me of someone I love, not because of what you have." He looked away, the muscle in his jaw twitching. "You're good at saying what people want to hear." Her chest tightened. "That's not fair." He turned back to her, eyes stormy. "Neither is being lied to." The words hit her like a slap. Inside, the gala continued. Vivian was still laughing with guests, unaware that her son was dismantling the one bridge that had brought light back into her life. Harper took a shaky step backward. "If you believe Knox over me, then there's nothing left to say." Carter's voice dropped. "You should go home tonight. We'll handle things from here." Home. The words suddenly sounded hollow. She nodded slowly, her throat tight. "Thank you for the opportunity." He didn't respond. As she turned to leave, the cold wind caught her gown, pulling it against her frame like a cruel reminder. Even beauty can't protect you from betrayal. She walked past the doormen, the photographers, the glittering guests who had once smiled at her. Now their eyes followed her like shadows, whispers trailing behind. "Did you hear? The Whitmore girl's been exposed." No one knew what really happened, but in this world, perception was truth. By the time she stepped out onto Central Park West, the drizzle had turned to rain. Harper lifted her face toward the sky, letting it wash away the sting in her eyes. The necklace at her throat caught the streetlight, a symbol of the gift that had turned into a chain. Inside the museum, Carter returned to his mother's side. Vivian reached for him, signing gently. "Where's Harper?" Carter hesitated. He signed back. "She had to leave." Vivian frowned, confusion darkening her features. She signed again. "Why? What happened?" He couldn't answer. Not truthfully. Across the room, Knox watched. Satisfied, he raised his glass in a silent toast. To control. To manipulation. To victory. That night, in her small Queens apartment, Harper unclasped the necklace and placed it on the table beside the folded napkin Vivian had once given her. Two symbols of two worlds. Kindness and cruelty. Side by side. She whispered to herself, "Never again." But deep inside, she knew the story wasn't over. Something in Knox's smirk at the gala told her one thing for certain. The truth was bigger than her pain, and she'd find it,
no matter what it cost. She came to bridge silence and wealth, and left carrying a wound no one could see. Would you have walked away after being accused like that, or stayed to fight for the truth? Comment stay if you'd have fought back, or leave if you have walked away. And don't miss what comes next, because the secret Knox buried will turn this story upside down. Subscribe before the truth surfaces.
For the next 3 days, the Whitmore penthouse was silent. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that felt like judgment. Carter had always thought silence was neutral, a break between words. But after Harper left the gala, silence became his punishment. Vivian hadn't spoken to him since. She no longer greeted him with her gentle smile or warm touch. She didn't sign her usual morning good day. She simply turned away when he entered the room, her disappointment louder than any voice could ever be. Carter didn't need to guess why. His mother knew. He sat in his office late one night, the city lights of Hudson Yards glinting off the glass walls. Papers cluttered his desk, charity ledgers, contracts, and a folder marked Disbursement Review. He tried to focus on numbers, but all he could see was Harper's face that night on the balcony, the hurt in her eyes when he accused her of betrayal. He told himself he'd done the right thing, that protecting his family's reputation mattered more than trusting a stranger. But each time he saw Vivian's empty chair at breakfast, the lie collapsed under its own weight. When he finally opened the ledger, his stomach turned. Something didn't add up. The Whitmore Foundation's donations to smaller programs, the kind that Vivian had always prioritized, were significantly lower than what was approved. The Bronx Center for Deaf Education, which Harper and Vivian had visited, was short by tens of thousands of dollars. Carter frowned. He flipped through page after page, tracing transfers routed through multiple shell accounts, all linked to a subsidiary that shouldn't exist. A name appeared on the authorization line. Knox Carrington. Carter leaned back, pulse quickening. The room suddenly felt colder. The next morning, he drove to Queens. It had been years since he'd driven through those narrow streets, past the bodegas, the laundromats, the buzzing chatter of everyday life. His black sedan looked out of place, like wealth trying to hide in plain sight. He stopped in a small bakery. The sign read Alina's Panaderia. Through the window, he saw Harper talking to the owner, wiping flour off her hands. For a moment, he just watched. She looked calmer here, free. When she finally noticed him standing outside, her face changed. Not anger, not surprise, just a quiet exhaustion, like someone who no longer expected good things. He walked in, removing his gloves. "Harper," he said softly. The bakery owner excused herself. Harper crossed her arms. "Why are you here?" Carter hesitated. "I came to apologize." She said nothing, so he continued. "You were right. I let doubt blind me. I saw what Knox wanted me to see." Her jaw tightened. "And now you see something else?" Carter nodded. "Fraud? Missing money. My mother's foundation was manipulated from the inside, and it started long before you ever came along." Harper's expression softened, but she didn't move closer. "You should tell her," she said quietly. "Vivian deserves to know." I swallowed hard. "She won't even look at me." "Then you don't deserve for her to," Harper replied. Her voice wasn't cruel, just honest. "Trust has to be earned back, Carter, and you can't buy it." She picked up a tray of pastries, turning away to serve another customer. The conversation was over. Carter left the bakery with one truth echoing in his mind. Money couldn't fix what pride destroyed. That night, back in Manhattan, Carter gathered everything: the financial records, the authorization papers, and the internal memos. He sent them to the Foundation's chief financial officer with one note: audit everything tied to Knox. No exceptions. He didn't tell Knox yet. He needed proof before confrontation. Meanwhile,
Upstairs, Vivian remained locked in her solarium. The orchids she once tended were beginning to wilt. He knocked twice and signed through the glass, "I need to talk." Vivian didn't respond. He pressed his hand against the door, his reflection merging with hers. Finally, she opened it just a crack. Her eyes were tired, but they burned with quiet fire. She lifted her hands and signed.
"You sent away the one person who made me feel human again." Carter's chest tightened. "I was wrong." Vivian signed faster now, her movements sharp. "Harper saw me when no one else did. You saw her as a threat. Why?" He lowered his gaze. "Because I've spent my life protecting this family from people who want to use us. I couldn't tell the difference anymore." Vivian stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned away and wrote something on a notepad. She handed it to him. In neat cursive, it read, "Then learn to tell the difference before you lose everything." She closed the door again. 2 days later, the audit results came in. The findings were worse than expected. Hundreds of thousands had been siphoned off over 5 years, small amounts from dozens of grants, all rerouted through front companies registered in the Caymans. Every transaction carried the same electronic signature, Knox Carrington. Carter's stomach turned. His cousin, the man he'd trusted since childhood, had used his mother's name to launder money through philanthropy. And Harper's kindness, her connection with Vivian, had threatened to expose it all. That's why Knox moved so quickly to discredit her. Carter clenched his fists. He'd been manipulated like a pawn in his own family's empire. He picked up his phone and dialed Knox's number. "Come to my office, now." When Knox arrived, his confidence filled the room like smoke. "Something wrong, cousin?" he asked smoothly, dropping into a chair. Carter slid the audit report across the table. "You tell me." He barely glanced at it before smirking. "You're not the first Whitmore to mistake generosity for good business." Carter's voice dropped. "You stole from my mother's foundation, from children who needed it." Knox laughed softly. "Don't get righteous now. We both know the foundation has always been a PR tool. I just made it profitable." Carter slammed his fist on the desk. "You're done. Board suspension, immediate audit of all accounts." Knox rose, adjusting his tie. "Be careful, Carter. Scandals don't stop with paperwork. They ripple. They drag everyone down, even the ones who think they're innocent." He walked out calmly, leaving a threat hanging in the air like smoke from a slow-burning fire. Carter sat back, exhaling shakily. He knew what Knox meant. If the story leaked, his mother's name, his company, his family's legacy could collapse overnight. He needed help, and there was only one person he could trust to navigate this mess: Harper. That night, Harper sat in her small living room, flipping through a sketchbook Leo had filled with colorful drawings. Her mind was quiet for the first time in weeks, until her phone vibrated. It was Carter. The message read, "I found out the truth, and I need you." She stared at it for a long time before typing back, "Then prove it." She hit send, closed her eyes, and leaned back on the couch. She didn't know it yet, but by morning, she'd be standing once again in the Whitmore world. Only this time, not as an outsider. This time, she'd return to help expose the very corruption that had nearly destroyed her. The truth is out, but not everyone wants it revealed. Would you have gone back to help the man who accused you? Comment yes if you'd return for justice, or no if you'd let him face the fallout alone. And subscribe before the next twist, because the next move Harper makes could cost her everything. The morning Harper returned to the Whitmore Foundation building, the sky over Manhattan looked bruised, gray clouds pressing low against the skyline, as if the city itself was holding its breath. She hadn't been there since the night of the gala, the night everything fell apart. But this time, she wasn't walking in as a guest. She was walking in as someone who carried the truth. Security guards nodded as she entered. Her name was already on the clearance list. Carter's doing. The moment the elevator doors opened to the 32nd floor, she heard the tension. Voices down the hall. The sharp hum of whispered arguments. The sound of power unraveling. Carter stood by the glass wall of the boardroom, his back to her, speaking quietly to a group of Foundation directors. His tone was calm, but every muscle in his body was wound tight. When he saw Harper step inside, conversation stopped. Some of the directors recognized her from the viral video months earlier, the waitress who had signed with the billionaire's mother. Their eyes widened with curiosity and judgment. Carter broke the silence first. "Thank you for coming." Harper nodded, her expression steady. "You said you needed help." He exhaled. "We have an emergency board session at noon. The press found out about the financial discrepancies. Knox is denying everything. He's claiming I forged the numbers to cover my own mismanagement." She blinked. "He's turning it on you?" "Yes," Carter said. "And if we don't present clear evidence by the end of the day, my mother's foundation will be under criminal review." Harper glanced at the stack of papers on the table, the audit reports, the financial trails, the proof. "Then we have to make it undeniable." He looked at her, his voice quieting. "You don't have to do this, Harper." "I know," she replied, "but I'm not doing it for you." That afternoon, reporters gathered outside the Foundation headquarters, their cameras aimed at the building's front doors. Social media had caught wind of the story. Whitmore Empire under investigation trended across timelines. Inside, Vivian Whitmore arrived in silence, escorted by her attorney. Her face was pale but resolute. The board members rose when she entered, though most avoided her gaze. Harper stood near the side of the room, clutching a folder of her own notes. She hadn't planned to speak. She was there to interpret for Vivian. But fate had other ideas. Carter entered last, his usual polished calm in place. He looked like a man who'd already decided the outcome. When the chairman gave the floor to him, Knox spoke smoothly. "The recent rumors about financial misconduct are baseless. Every transfer, every reallocation was authorized through appropriate channels. I can provide documentation for each." Vivian's lawyer slid a stack of papers toward him. "And yet, these transfers route through entities you personally control." Knox smiled faintly. "A coincidence of naming, perhaps. Shell companies exist for efficiency." Carter stood up, his voice steady but cold. "Those shell companies don't belong to the Foundation, Knox. They belong to you." The room went still. Harper watched Knox's confidence falter just slightly, a flicker, quickly hidden. Carter continued, "You've been siphoning donations for years, and when my mother began asking questions, you made sure to keep her isolated. You even targeted the one person who helped her reconnect with the world." Every eye turned toward Harper. Knox's lips curled into a smirk. "Ah, the waitress, here to save the day again." Vivian's expression hardened. She raised her hands and began to sign rapidly, fury in every movement. Harper translated, her voice clear and unwavering. "You stole from children, Knox, from families who trusted us. And you used my silence as your shield." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed as a few reporters slipped in at the back. Knox's tone sharpened. "You can't prove a thing." Harper stepped forward. "Actually, we can."
From her folder, she produced a USB drive. When Vivian and I visited the Bronx Center, Nadia Patel, the director, mentioned missing funds. I helped her trace invoices tied to those same shell companies. Each one links back to accounts opened in your name. She connected the drive to the presentation screen, Transaction records, email confirmations, and signatures filled the wall in front of them. The evidence was clear. Knox froze. For the first time, his polished mask cracked. "You don't understand how these things work," he snapped. Vivian signed one last phrase, sharp and final. Harper translated, "We understand perfectly. You're finished." Security moved toward him. Knox tried to protest, but the board chairman cut him off. "Mr. Carrington, you're relieved of duty effective immediately. Legal counsel will contact you." As the guards escorted him out, Knox turned his gaze on Harper. "Enjoy your victory," he hissed. "You just buried the family that saved you." She met his glare. "No, I saved the family that almost forgot what honesty looks like." When the room finally cleared, the tension released like a thunderclap. Carter sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Vivian reached out, touching his shoulder. For the first time in weeks, she signed softly, "Now you see why she mattered." Carter looked up at Harper, emotion breaking through his composure. "I owe you more than I can say." Harper shook her head. "You owe your mother an apology." He nodded slowly and crossed the room to where Vivian stood by the window. He took her hands, his eyes glistening. "I'm sorry," he said aloud, each word trembling, "for doubting you, for letting someone use your silence against you." Vivian smiled faintly, tears shining in her eyes. She signed, "You were afraid to listen. I forgive you." The room went quiet, except for the clicking of rain against the windows. Then Carter turned back to Harper. His voice cracked slightly. "And to you, I can't begin to undo what I said, but I want to spend the rest of my life proving I meant none of it." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the window beside him. The skyline glowed under the gray storm, reflections of the city rippling across the glass. "You don't have to prove anything," she said quietly. "You just have to live differently." He smiled faintly. "Then let me start by asking you to stay, not as an employee, but as part of something better, rebuilding what was broken." She turned to Vivian, who gave a slow nod of approval. For the first time in a long time, Harper allowed herself to believe in second chances. 2 weeks later, the Bronx Center for Deaf Education held a special assembly. The gymnasium buzzed with excitement. Teachers, students, families, and reporters packed the bleachers. Carter stood on stage beside Harper and Vivian. The foundation's banners hung behind them, newly redesigned with the words, "Integrity speaks loudest." Carter stepped to the podium. "Today we announce the creation of the Leo Reyes Fellowship, named after Harper's brother. It will fund arts and technology programs for deaf and hard-of-hearing students across New York." The audience erupted in applause. Harper covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Vivian reached for her hand and signed, "This is your work. Own it." As the ceremony continued, Carter began signing along with the interpreters. His movements were still imperfect, hesitant, but sincere. Each sign was an apology turned into action. When he finished, the crowd stood and clapped. But for Harper, the real applause was quieter. Vivian's approving smile, the sound of children laughing, and the peace that came with knowing justice had finally spoken. That night, as the city lights shimmered on the East River, Harper walked out of the school gymnasium into the cool air. She looked up at the skyline and whispered, "Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with redemption." Then her phone buzzed. A new message. No name attached. Just one line. "You exposed him. But do you really know who helped you?"
Her stomach tightened. The unknown sender had attached a scanned envelope, one that looked eerily like the anonymous letter she'd received months ago. She frowned, heart pounding. Another secret was waiting, and it had her name written all over it. She saved their legacy, but someone out there knows more than she does. Who sent that message? Friend or enemy? comment ally if you think someone's protecting her, or threat if you think danger's coming next. And subscribe before Harper opens that envelope, because what's inside will change everything. It was the first quiet morning Harper had known in months. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the newly renovated Whitmore Foundation office. The walls that once echoed with corporate coldness now displayed hand-painted art from deaf students, vibrant colors alive with hope. The city skyline beyond Hudson Yards shimmered like it was finally exhaling after a long storm. But peace didn't come without its weight. On her desk sat the mysterious envelope that had arrived 2 nights earlier. The sender was anonymous. Inside was a single name written in looping cursive: Dr. Eleanor James, Vivian Whitmore's former colleague at Columbia University. And beneath the name, one sentence: "Ask her who told you to greet Vivian that night." Harper turned the card over, her pulse steady but curious. Whoever sent it knew the exact moment her life had changed, that split second at the Aurelia when she'd greeted Vivian in sign language. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had led her there. She didn't tell anyone yet, not even Carter. Not until she knew why. Across the hall, Carter's office door was open. He was in a meeting with Vivian and Nadia Patel from the Bronx Center. They were finalizing plans for the new ASL Community Hub, the first of its kind in the state. Through the glass, Harper could see Vivian signing animatedly, her energy returned, her laughter soft and contagious. Carter looked lighter too, though the strain of recent months still lingered behind his smile. When the meeting ended, Carter stepped into Harper's doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "Truce offering," he said with a grin. She smirked. "Truce implies we're still fighting." He shrugged. "Maybe we are. About who gets credit for saving the foundation." Harper took the cup, sitting back in her chair. "You know it was your mother who saved it, not either of us." He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "She says the same thing about you." There was a pause, that soft, unspoken space where gratitude lives. Then Carter leaned forward slightly. "Harper, when all this started, you wanted to disappear. Now people are calling for you to take a leadership role. The board's voting next week. They want you to head the new community programs." Harper blinked. "You're serious?" "You earned it, Harper. You turned a scandal into something that matters. The position is yours if you want it." That night, Harper walked along the East River, the lights of the city flickering on the water like scattered stars. She thought of Leo, asleep back in Queens, his scholarship secured through the Leo Reyes Fellowship. She thought of Vivian's warmth, Carter's apology, and all the hands she'd seen signing joyfully at the Bronx Center. But she also thought about the note, the unknown sender, the possibility that her story had been set in motion by someone she'd never met. Choice, not rescue. The words played over her mind. Everything she'd built so far came from moments when she chose to act, speaking up, signing first, walking away when respect was lost, coming back when forgiveness mattered. She wouldn't let anyone else claim her story, not now. The next morning, Harper met with Dr. Eleanor James at a small cafe near Columbia University. The woman was older, elegant, with sharp eyes that hinted at stories untold. "I was close with Vivian," Dr. James said, stirring her tea, "before she withdrew from academia. I kept in touch through mutual friends. I knew she felt isolated. When I heard about you, your work with the Bronx Center, your connection to ASL, I arranged for you to be on staff at the Aurelia that night." Harper's eyebrows lifted. "You arranged it?" Dr. James smiled softly. "Call it divine timing, with a little human planning. I wanted Vivian to see that empathy still existed outside her world, that someone could speak her language without pity." Harper sat back, stunned. All this time, she'd thought that night was random, an intersection of luck and courage. Instead, it had been fate, guided by quiet intention. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Because," Dr. James said gently, "stories like yours remind people that goodness isn't passive, It's a decision. You chose to greet her. You could have ignored her like everyone else. That's why it mattered. Later that day, Harper returned to the foundation. She found Vivian in her office, surrounded by letters from donors and families the new fellowship had helped. Harper handed her the card with Dr. James's name. Vivian read it, then smiled knowingly. "I should have guessed," she signed. "Eleanor always believed small acts create the biggest change." Harper nodded. "So do you." Vivian touched her hand and signed one last message. "Promise me you'll keep doing that, seeing people before the world tells you who they are." Harper signed back, "I promise." A week later, the foundation hosted its relaunch gala. Not the kind filled with billionaires and champagne, but teachers, parents, and students. The event was held at the New York Public Library, under the same domed ceiling where Harper's name had once been whispered in gossip. Now it was spoken in gratitude. Carter took the stage first, his voice steady. When this organization nearly fell apart, one person refused to let silence win. "Tonight, I want to officially introduce our new Director of Community Partnerships, Harper Reyes." Applause filled the hall as Harper stepped forward. Vivian signed the same introduction beside him, her gestures graceful and proud. Harper took a breath, then began speaking and signing at the same time. Sometimes life gives you noise so loud it drowns out what matters. Other times it gives you silence and waits to see what you'll do with it. I chose to listen. The audience was silent, moved. She continued, "Goodness isn't a grand gesture. It's the small moment when you decide to see someone, really see them. That's how change begins." When she finished, the room erupted into cheers. Children clapped, families signed thank you from the crowd, and Vivian's eyes glistened with pride. As the event wound down, Harper stood near the exit, watching people leave with hope on their faces. Carter joined her quietly. "You did it," he said. She smiled. "No, we did it." He looked at her for a moment, then said softly, "You never wanted to be rescued. You just needed the chance to choose." Harper turned to him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Exactly. And now I choose purpose." Outside, the night air was cool, the streets alive with the hum of the city, taxis, laughter, footsteps echoing like distant music. Harper looked up, breathing deeply. Her story had started in silence, but it had grown into something louder, something stronger than fear or doubt. And as she walked down the library steps towards a future she'd built with her own hands, she smiled. Because some endings aren't really endings at all. They're invitations to keep choosing kindness over and over again. She didn't need saving, she needed to be seen. And when she chose goodness, the whole world heard her story. Would you have made the same choice? Comment yes if you believe one act of kindness can change everything. And subscribe now, because the next story from Goodness Corner will remind you that the quietest voices often carry the loudest truths.